Are you ready for one of our most vulnerable conversations yet? Ore Oduba is known for winning Strictly, hosting News Round, and covering the Olympics. But today, he's come into the Life of Bryony studio to talk to me about a topic that is rarely spoken about: addiction to online pornography and how it's blighted much of his life. He's now almost 18 months clean and sober, and he's opening up in the hope of shedding light on a subject shrouded in shame so that he can help others in the same position.
I've lost so much in my life, Bryony, that I know this could all end tomorrow. And I think if we go through our lives living in a shame or not speaking up about things that are important to us and the people that are connected to us, that if I knew I could have made a difference, even to one person, that allowed them to come out and speak about something that they were struggling with, I couldn't forgive myself.
My chat with Ore coming up right after this. I want to start by asking you how you are, because I always think of you as this great beaming smile, or the hips on Strictly. You know, you are all of these different things. You have presented children's television. You won the most watched series of Strictly Come Dancing in 2016. You have presented the Olympics. You've done all sorts of things, right? But today you're here to talk about something completely different. Yeah. And so I wanted to start by just checking in with you.
Love that.
Taking a deep breath.
Yes.
And asking you how you are right now.
I am so grateful for that question, Bryony, because one, we need to do it more. I mean, it's not lost to me that November is Men's Mental Health Month. And I think it's just a reminder for us all to check in with all of us, because everybody is dealing with something behind the scenes that, or the life that we project outwardly, people wouldn't be aware of. Myself, my family have been through a really tumultuous time just in the last 2 years, let alone as I reflect on nearly 40 years of my life. And actually, all of that, bereavements, a huge change in my life after divorce, have actually helped me action a part of me that was previously silenced, a version of me that was previously kind of conformist and restricted and kind of trying to stay within the lines of societally what was expected of me, that was actually destroying my life. You wouldn't know that with the smile and with the outward kind of presence and projection. And that's what happens to so many of us. We put this best foot forward in order to kind of show that we're doing okay, and silently not dealing with a lot of struggle. I have got to a point in my life, having done a whole, 2 years of work on myself, that a lot of that struggle that was previously under the surface, I have allowed to come to a boiling point, almost to the surface, to actually, and I'm kind of letting it come through me. I've got no shame. I've got no fear. And I am, for the first time in my life, living so presently in the person that I am today, having understood all of the trials, the tribulations, the struggles, the difficulty, the trauma that was my life before this. And only then can you start living authentically. And so you find me now on your gorgeous sofas as a version of me that I've always desperately hoped to become. And finally, I get to 2.0. I get to pick up the life that I've always wanted. And that's what I hope to be, as we all got to learn, we've got to work, and we still develop. That's the version of me that I want to go forward with.
I think it's really relatable for a lot of people as they come to midlife, that they spend the first 40 years or so of their lives trying to be the person they think everyone wants them to be.
Yeah.
And then the next 40 years, if we're lucky,
yes,
getting to be the person we actually want to be. But I think it takes us that long. It can take us 4 decades to work out who it is we do want to be.
Yeah, totally. And that's not just, you're absolutely right. I read and I hear and I learn so much about people reflecting in their 50s and their 60s and going, these are the lessons that I wish I knew when I was 20, when I was 30. And often you can't, these are rites of passage. You need to learn these lessons yourself. But I feel so privileged. You know, I think some of these difficulties have actually been blessings. You know, I think of my sister's death by suicide and what they did for us as a family, and the conversation that I had with my sister before that they died. You know, they laid a foundation, they laid a bed for all of us to exist in a life without them as part of their departure, as part of their death. And through that grief, through that mourning, I was able to finally understand, Bryony, we only get one chance. We only get one chance to live the version of ourselves that we were meant to be put on this planet to live through. Not a version that anybody else has decided for us, not another version that we think is the one that we always wanted, or even the one that we wanted when we were 10, 20, 30 years old. We grow and we develop, and so much of the things that we're going through are defining the person that we're becoming. And I've figured it out now. I didn't wait before it was too late. And there was a part of me in my life where I had this conflict. I had this inner conflict because there was an instinct, there was a gut feeling that was so conflicted with the path that I was going down, that it was destroying me inside out. It got to the point, and I was starting to understand how I was feeling. It got to the point of suicidal ideation. Mm-hmm. My sister and I talked about this, and it was such a painful but important conversation that we had, because it gets to the point where you are hopeless, where you think, I can't go down this route anymore. And I feel like there's only one way out. And I feel very lucky that I understood that that wasn't the way that I wanted to go. I understood that me feeling like people would be better off without me wasn't how I really felt. It was a product of a lot of mental health struggle, about worthlessness, about hopelessness, and about not feeling like I was enough. And I wanted to do something about it. You know, men of a certain age, you know, under 50, it's the biggest killer. I knew that. And I knew I wanted it to be different.
So your sister Lola, who came out as non-binary,
yeah,
they helped you during this time when you were experiencing this suicidal ideation.
Yeah. We just talked about it as you do, as I think we should do in conversation. You know, I had started to have panic attacks. I had started to have anxiety. I remember a period of my life where I was literally plugging myself out of the real world and putting music in both ears through the day, because I couldn't come to terms with that inner conflict, that I wanted to just hide it. I wanted to drown it out, literally with noise. And my sister had gone through addiction, had gone through so many mental health struggles, was on a number of 12-step programs. You follow that course down without intervention, it becomes too much. And in the end, for my sister, you know, they wrote to us as a family. I actually left a video for all of us to describe how loved they were, how that there wasn't anything that we could have done. They rested us assured that this wasn't anything to do with us. But my sister had reached a point where they were literally tired of this struggle, and they couldn't see a way out, despite doing so much external living, so much happiness with other people, so much validation from other people, and really coming to life, vitality through stand-up, improvisation, comedy, choir, singing, cooking, creating, drawing and painting and writing spoken word. they brought so many people together in their outward life, but then go home, close the doors. They had this conflict within themselves that they just could not come to terms with. And that was every day. And it becomes exhausting to the point that for some people it is too much.
So can we talk a bit about, you have mentioned this inner conflict. Your sister had it, I've had it.
Yeah.
You have had it too. And you mentioned that you were a year clean and sober in a specific addiction on Instagram a few months ago.
Yeah.
You deliberately didn't mention the type of addiction, but you have now, and you want to talk about this. And I really admire this, Ore, because addiction generally is very stigmatized, it's very taboo, you know, as alcoholics, as drug addicts, you know, people won't spit on us if we're on fire kind of thing. You know? But it's better. But your type of addiction is not spoken about at all.
No.
And you were being so brave to do this, and that is porn addiction.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is shining a light on stuff that people don't do, but people need to do, because I did some research about the statistics about this, you know, and we know that there's a study in the Journal of Behavioral Addictions which found that 7% of Americans reported having a porn addiction, right? A quarter of all search engine searches are for porn, okay?
Yes.
And there was a study of UK teenagers a couple of years ago which found that 22% of school children between 14 and 18 had viewed porn on multiple occasions. Of those, 1 in 5 felt they had a porn habit, and 1 in 10 said they felt addicted. And teachers say they're being left to pick up the pieces of this exposure, with sort of sexually harmful behaviour becoming quite common among teenagers. And this is where your story starts, isn't it, Ore? You were 9 years old, I think.
Well, I'm so grateful, Bryony, to you, because I think back to putting this out on my Instagram in the summer, and I was terrified because it isn't discussed. This had been my life. And I, like you say, I was quietly celebrating, if you like, a year of sobriety, a year of escaping addiction, a seed that had started in my childhood. And I put it on my Instagram, and I was overwhelmed with the support. I couldn't have imagined how many people resonated with the idea of addiction. Like you said, I didn't explain exactly what it was because I wasn't 100% sure how. This isn't something that is talked about, and I wanted to make sure that it was done sensitively and not jumped on, and I wanted to gather more information and talk to more people who are affected by this. And so when I was thinking about how best to bring this to public attention, I thought you were such a wonderful ally to be able to sensitively, without shame and without judgment, talk about something that I think has become a public health issue. And just to give a little context to my addiction, like you said, I was 9 years old when I was first exposed to it. And if I may, just to intervene before I go too far down, the word itself, I'm going to talk about explicit adult content, because there are two things when we talk about the P word, and it's not about shame about what it is, because it is what it is. There are two things. One, the amount of times that we're going to speak about it, algorithmically, if we speak about the P word too frequently, this kind of information goes out online. There are blocks in place that will prevent this kind of conversation being put on a wider scale because of the connotations of it. You Google search that word, it's not coming up with self-help.
No.
It's not coming up with ways to make your life better or to get away from it. It's coming up with all of the images that are conjured up in your mind. The other thing is that it's a trigger. Because for anybody who is struggling with it, everything becomes a trigger. Everything forces you back into a behavior that is against what you feel and what you want. And so I think it's just really helpful to understand that psychologically something happens when you say that word, when you search that word. And I think it's just helpful to understand, whilst there is an industry for those who are trying to overcome their habit, their behavior, and in my case, addiction, we have to try to create a language that allows them to bring it to the table. So that's just one thought. But I was 9. And
Sorry about that.
No, Bryony.
But that's really interesting.
I think it's so important. I think it's so important because we have such a stigma and a shame and a lack of understanding about psychologically what's happening.
Well, also, I think it's really important. There's going to be a lot of people listening, right? And they maybe have children they're worried about being exposed to this. They maybe have husbands they think are exposed to it. Maybe they themselves, because let's not stigmatize the fact that women also watch explicit adult content, you know? So this is something that affects a lot of people, a hell of a lot of people, and it goes completely under the radar. And it really is the addiction which dare not speak its name. Yes.
So, and I think it's harmful. And when I think about the word harmful and we think about the material that we're talking about, often we think of it as 18 plus, or we think of it about something, I don't know, that especially from my perspective as a parent, there is a conversation that makes us feel uncomfortable that we don't want our kids to go through. And I think we need to get away from that idea that it's what makes us uncomfortable, because what's happening when we think of the prevalence, you mentioned some of the statistics about how widely used this is, and we haven't even scratched the surface. They're going to come into contact with this. And when we think of what is harmful, add a curious young mind to these images, they are psychologically adapting how they see the world. I think it's a little bit like being on the road and seeing a car accident. You know, we're not necessarily liking what we're seeing, but the curiosity is forcing us to stare at something that could be sad or something that could be tragic. With a curious mind, it's not something that they're liking seeing, but they're curious enough to want to keep watching it. And I think the harm comes in that without adult guidance, without intervention, without kind of helping our kids through these pitfalls, we leave that young curious mind to kind of educate itself, to understand that world themselves. And if we were to give a kid any of the things that are so dangerous and so kind of all-consuming and that we worry about for them in our world, if we were to let them do that on their own, we understand how dangerous things can happen.
You've just become an ambassador for smartphone-free childhood.
Yeah, an official champion for smartphone-free childhood. And
this is really important to you.
It's so important to me because, and I think it's so important to so many parents, caregivers, teachers. We are the first generation that have grown up in not only a digital world, not only a broadband a world with such an incredible access to the internet, but that smartphone change, that's what's developed about what we have in our hands, has completely existentially changed our lives. We know about the pitfalls, but we still struggle as adults when we pick up our phone about what behaviors change. You know, we know that phones are built to become addictive. And so in the hands of children, there is just enough information out there to know that they haven't got the skills to be able to deal with the things that are coming back with it. And again, whether it is looking at explicit content online or having a phone in your hand, without information as to why it will be harmful for children, they're going to use it how they're going to use it. It's not about trying to do it against it or banning technology or banning phones. It's about helping kids understand why it's harmful, that there are mental health connotations to it. There are attention stealing connotations to it. And I think there is a kind of a digital era now that is bringing so many more problems that almost, you know, I think about Instagram, and I saw something recently that said there are more sexualized images online on social media that they're actually struggling to keep up to delete them.
Mm.
you're between 3 to 6 clicks away from seeing adult content. And when you look at how prevalent and how sexualized a lot of the social media is, if a young person has that in the palm of their hands, there's no way that they, with that curious mind and with the way that algorithms work, it's so hard to imagine that they might not go further.
I want to go back
Let's go
to
back.
you
Okay.
because I'm interested in you because the way you tell your story. You were 9 years old when you first saw porn.
Images, yeah.
Can you talk me through how it kind of developed? Because again, it's going on. It's like it's almost a double life, right?
Yeah.
Because you grow up in this very religious, private school, you're sporty, you're academic, you're all of these things. And at the same time is this world that you're sort of getting involved in. And we're talking about the very early days of the internet here, aren't we?
Yeah. And at 9 years old, it definitely wasn't what it is now. The access that we have now, it definitely wasn't that. And it was just a very innocuous older brother of a friend that saw that showed us these images. Quite sinisterly, it was actually a sexualized image of a video game.
Right.
Which actually, when you think about it, something that in your mind as a kid, you're thinking is something safe and is playful, becomes sexualized.
Right.
And we're seeing a lot of that. And so you just become curious. I just became curious. I think I became sexually engaged at a very early age. I was seeing a lot, whether it is on television, on music videos, or I had an older brother, lads magazines. And so there was this kind of opening and widening of my eyes about something that I was interested in. I think as I grew up, it was combined with a whole number of things that was accessible to me. You know, I was a huge gamer. By the time I was 14, 15, I had also moved into the ground floor of my house, and so I had full access to the family computer. And so I was up into the night gaming, had full access to the internet. And by this point, you're in the full throngs of addiction because you're not fully conscious about what's happening. In fact, what's dangerous is I didn't know that I was doing something that was wrong. I was just using this material because I had access to it. I was also getting this kind of stimulation, and I was falling further and further into something that I actually didn't know was becoming addiction. And at that point, the only thing kind of stopping you from going further is your own consciousness. There's no real end to it. And I also loved making, I remember my sister and I used to make mix CDs.
Mm-hmm.
We used to download music. And there were particular sites that, again, just being curious, you could download not only music, but you could download entire adult movies.
Right.
Just searching and being curious, and this stuff became available. So, before too long, this became my life. This became something that I was always going back to. And you touched on my house, and, I was such a privileged kid. We were given so much opportunity by our parents. And this was a world that, as you say, was completely silenced. It was completely secret. And as I've gone back over my years to see what was happening, there was a lot of fear.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of trauma in my house. There was a lot of emotional neglect. There were things that kids need that you can't, that if you're not getting, that you're going to search for elsewhere. And in my position, I saw that as being the perfect kind of foundation and breathing ground for something that became addiction. Because as you know, addiction is a symptom of something that's missing. It's kind of an emotional regulation. As I grew up through teenagehood and into young adult, I knew that this was something that was becoming a dependency. This was becoming something that I was going to for every emotion, whether it was neglect or lack of connection or depression or anger or sadness or even happy
Any feeling at all.
Any feeling became something that I became dependent on. It became a friend.
So you were sort of using it to both, and I think this is the case with most addictions, to both numb and feel at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Can we talk about the science?
Yes.
And this is,
I'd love to hear about it.
Well, what we know about overexposure to adult content is that it releases these, it creates these new neurological pathways in the brain that releases dopamine. And for a kid, there's research that says it's like it creates the same synaptic response in the brain as if you gave them a class A drug.
Right, so as if you gave them a line of cocaine.
It's the same synaptic response in the brain, but we're talking about children here. And we know that in the brain, it takes up until you're 25 for your mind to be fully formed. So at that point, it's most neuroelastic. That's when we're kind of getting an understanding of what our world looks like and what we feel inside it. So you have overexposure to a lot of these images. It's creating flooding of the brain of dopamine. And it's the same in any addiction, whether it is drugs or drink or sugar or seeing sexually explicit images. Flood the brain, it creates these two important reactions. It creates an over-reliance on it. So you see enough that actually it becomes something that you become dependent on. And that becomes the foundation of a lot of addiction. But it also creates this numbing. It creates this tolerance to what you've already seen, which means that you want more.
Yeah.
They talk about dopamine. You need more as the molecule of more. You want not only more of what you're seeing, but you actually then you want to see a higher intensity of what you're seeing. So we consider what might be something that you might see at the start, give it time, and those images are starting to become deeper and darker. And it's at that point that the mind starts playing tricks. You start finding yourself in a hole, trying that you can't escape. You find yourself in a place that becomes, you're not really sure what's real anymore. And that's when you find yourself in a really dark hole of shame. And a lot of this content, a lot of this addiction is about shame. And you find yourself isolating yourself from a lot of people. And with a kid, when you add in things like adverse childhood experiences, trauma, neglect, abuse, violence, a lot of these things, or behavioral conditions like ADHD and autism, add all of these things into those behaviors. And with ADHD, I got diagnosed a few weeks ago, so I've come to understand it. You're 3 times more likely to fall into addiction if you've got ADHD. Add all of these things into the mix, and it becomes so hard for a young person to navigate without this kind of socio-sexual mapping becoming normal in their brain. They start seeing this content as normal. They start seeing it as acceptable. And we hear so much about boys and young boys and angry boys and broken boys. And I feel so empathetic to them, because in my case, if I hadn't discovered these places, these passions, I thrived in the sports fields and I was on stage a lot as a kid. If I hadn't found those pathways where I came alive, in today's world, I could absolutely have seen myself feeling hopeless and falling into behaviors with addiction, fear at home, ADHD. I had no success with girls at school. It was something that I was desperate to have a connection with, but I always felt rejected by them. Add all of these things into the mix, and I do think you find hopelessness as a young person, as a young boy in my case. And so you find that connection in whatever it might be. And if all of this material is as accessible as it is now, 100% is going to be something that you're going to connect to. And it's actually going to give you the feeling of what was missing. And that's how the addiction starts.
So are you talking about sort of, I mean, guess in today's culture, that is sort of incel culture and all of that you could have become a lost boy. You know, it's very easy to get lost. But I want to talk about what actually happened, because you did have these passions. And so you did have a successful career. You went to university, you graduated, and you immediately went into television presenting.
Yeah.
So you've got, again, it's this thing of a double life, which is so relatable in addiction.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we often think of addicts as visibly showing the signs of addiction. You know, with alcohol, it's the old man on the park bench. With addicts, it's like a heroin addict. The reality is most addicts are like sort of ducks. They're sort of calm above water and paddling frantically below, you know?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask you about that sort of dual life that goes on where, because even though you're getting exposed to more and more things and you're having to push, and you've seen this with the whole of the porn industry, I believe, like it's over the last 5 to 10 years, just what people are clicking on is becoming more and more extreme.
Yeah.
So it's not, so more extreme things are normalized, but fundamentally, you know, it's wrong. You feel that shame.
Yeah.
And I just wondered what that's like living with those two things at the same time.
I think it's part of what becomes a mental health crisis in you, because there is this dual life. There is this absolute inner conflicts. And I think of myself as someone, I knew who I was. I knew I had a kind disposition. The women in my life were always the people that I connected most to. I think today I have way more female friends. I actually connect way more with the women in my life, and they've always been a really important part of the person that I was growing up. And so when you have this other side, it's because you're seeing something that I knew as a kid. I couldn't bring this to my sisters. In fact, there was a moment when I was 11 when I got caught in a compromising position by a family member. And I knew that's all something that I could never bring up.
Right.
I could never talk about this with anybody. In fact, I actually became a master at masking this other side.
So that response told you this is...
Well, I knew in my makeup, in my upbringing, do anything that strays out of the lines and life as I knew it was going to be over.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we were told we grew up in a family that was built on discipline, obedience, and education. And doing anything different or being anything different wasn't acceptable. We were made to fear the implications of our behaviors, which absolutely things should be, there are consequences to your actions. But for a child, thinking if you do anything that is going to cause trouble and thinking that might spell the end of your life as it is, that you're going to absolutely shield, it's not safe. You're going to shield yourself from that being a reality. So it then becomes shameful. It becomes something that I have to keep to myself.
You don't feel safe being yourself.
You don't feel safe being yourself. And I think it becomes, I see that, especially with the content that we're talking about, as one of the real drivers in division. Because I think if you're living on an unhealthy diet of this imagery, it isn't giving you healthy relationships. It isn't giving you the proper template to what is acceptable, for what is consensual, to what is normal. And when you're kind of living in that dichotomy, I think it's really quite dangerous. We talk about like social media is what it is now. It's such a much more prevalent thing. It's in our hands. It's something that we can literally click of a button and we've got the world at our fingertips. Back when I was a teenager, there was MSN Messenger. Mm-hmm. You run home from school and you would click on the internet. And
so exciting.
And it was exciting because, your life as it was in the day might not have been successful. You might have felt rejected. Something might have happened, but you can have another existence online. And so you start making other friends, making other connections, and it's wonderful. And for me, I enjoy speaking to lots of people. But I remember speaking to a girl. I remember speaking to, and connecting to a girl online. I was 18 at the time, living at home, still at school. And we started talking over time. And that then moved on to another social media website. We started talking there. Bryony, we got into a relationship online.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I knew that this world was something that I couldn't share with anybody. I couldn't share with friends. I couldn't share with, definitely wouldn't be able to share it with my family, not my siblings. And so this relationship continued to the point that we decided we were going to meet. So we decided that we were going to meet somewhere away from home. And we both made a journey hundreds of miles from our homes to meet. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell my parents about this. This was a kind of a branch, a consequence of something that, of a world that becomes so secretive that I was this other life. You know, and I've spoken to my mum about this since, and she knows that I was going to bring this story out there. And she talks about not knowing anything about this. And this is the whole point, because as a young person, when there is a taboo and a shame around your behavior, there's 100% no way that you can bring this to light. So of course she didn't know. I was 2 or 3 steps ahead of her to make sure that this was something that she didn't know. And I was a model student. I was a choir boy, in fact. I was a prefect, a school captain. I was all of these things that I wanted to be. I knew were going to be accepted and validated. And then I had this other life. And so we met. And at 18, we slept together. And then the next day that we left, and that was the last I saw of this person. And I look back at that chapter as a parent and I'm terrified. Mm-hmm. Because there was not one single other person that knew about my behavior, that knew what was happening. That person might not have been real. Mm-hmm. That might not have been the person that they said that they were. They might have come with other people. There are so many other dangerous implications that might have come from that meeting that I'm so lucky and so glad to be able to say did not happen. And in that case, it wasn't something that became dangerous, but it could absolutely have manifested itself in other ways today without us giving kids the safety, taking away the shame and the taboo of what they're going through. You know, adolescence was a huge moment kind of societally, culturally, to really understand what is going on under our noses.
In our own houses.
In our own houses, Brian, behind closed doors.
Yeah.
That kids are sharing things between them on WhatsApp, and there is a really dark subculture amongst young people because they just don't have anywhere else that they can go with it. And it's become so normalized, as you say, there's such a prevalence with it from across the board with our use of it. I think we're growing up on an unhealthy diet of sexualized content.
But we almost don't know that that's what's happening.
100%.
Can I ask you, because you talk about how you became a master of masking, right? Which is, again, a very common addiction thing. How did it manifest for you? So can I ask, just for anyone interested in, how many hours a day or a week were you sort of managing to look at the content? How were you looking at the content? What, you know, as it went through? Because we're talking about from age 9 to age 39. So you're covering a big kind of like period of change technologically. Yeah. So but with each passing year, it's getting easier to access this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I mean, at its worst, Bryony, it was, you know, a full day.
Really?
It's become so deeply entrenched. You know, I mentioned before about everything being a trigger. You know, I think from adolescence and being a teenager, anything could have been a moment ago. I know how to make that thought real later. I know where I can go to be able to create a world in my mind that is going to give me the stimulation that I need. Mm-hmm. And what I watched happen over that time is so terrifying, because it wasn't just what was becoming normal for me. What was becoming normal on these platforms was so flipped on its head from what it was before. You know, the level of extremity, the level of violence. And this is why I think one of the huge reasons I wanted to bring this to attention, because I think what we understand to be adult imagery isn't what is really happening. You know, even in the last 5 years, and we think about how technologically we've all changed, whether it is, you know, working from home and everything, a lot of stuff happened from in COVID time. And I think about, in that time, there has been a real normalization, a real domestication about how this stuff is accessible. And, you know, earlier this year, the Children's Commissioner published this report about what I think is a public health crisis for young people. She talked about kids as young as 6 years old accessing harmful adult content, that it's normal. There's some conjecture between 11 and 13 as being the average age for kids seeing this kind of material. 60% of it is by accident.
Right.
So we talk about some of these.
They're not even going out to look for it.
They're not even trying to look for it. They're just going about their everyday, normal, what you might expect to be normal activity online, and things are just popping up. Or you might be a couple of clicks away and these things are popping up. 80% of it is on social media.
Right. Okay.
WhatsApp, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. And that it is normal for this content to be violent.
Okay. So can I ask you, because I think a lot of parents assume that because the Online Safety Act has come in, that creates a level of protection. But actually, clearly, that stops people underage from accessing the mainstream porn sites. But obviously, this is a much deeper problem. So it's available sort of all over the shop. Yeah,
and I saw that online safety bill came out just a couple of weeks before the Children's Commissioner published this report. And I saw that, and a lot of people will be aware that the VPN rates, the configurations that you can put into your devices to go around that restriction, also spiked at the same time.
Right.
But I looked at it, and there were a number of things that came into force. You could have age identification, there was AI identification, and mobile phone verification. And by the way, if you Google it, Google will tell you ways to get around these restrictions. So even me saying this isn't me whistleblowing. This is just, I'm thinking about how a young mind, how maybe even an addicted mind might try to get around it. I think of myself when I was a kid. I knew where my parents' identification was. So I might be going to find that ID to try and put it in. Or if it wasn't mine, I might have a friend or an older brother or a friend of an older brother, or find somebody on WhatsApp who might be able to give me the identification, be able to put that into that. AI is a bit more difficult, or a facial recognition. But mobile registration, in my young mind, I'm thinking I'm just going to go and buy a separate SIM card, put that into my phone, and then I'll get around it that way.
Master of masking.
Well, we do give our kids more credit these days for how much more they know.
Yeah.
But again, I think it would be naive of us to think that by putting up a block that it's going to stop them from going to find it, because these are young, curious minds, and especially with the prevalence of it that it is right now, I just don't think it's doing enough. And I think when you think about 80% of it being on social media, I think 45% from this report published by the Children's Commissioner was on X.
Wow.
And certainly, from my experience, that would have been absolutely a place that you would go
really
to find a lot of this content. I have spoken to so many friends and so many incredible people who've shared with me their experience of seeing adult content online. And everybody wants this to be different. So many friends have come out and told me about their difficulties and struggles that they've had seeing stuff online. Their own addiction, their own body dysmorphia about seeing stuff online, how it's affected their relationships, I think there is such a shame and a taboo around it, which means that we have to deal with it alone. And it doesn't have to be that way, because like any addiction, but this is stuff that's happening through a digital world. We need to know that there are places to go, that actually we're not alone. We're not disgusting. We're not shameful. And as soon as you kind of remove yourself from that understanding as you, as your personality, it starts enabling you to make a change. And in my case, I had been so desperate for this not to be me.
Yeah.
This.
For how long had you been desperate for it not to be you?
I had been desperate for it. Maybe what's quite sinister is that I didn't know I had a problem.
Yeah.
You talked about some stats about 7% of Americans. I don't know that many people know that they have a problem.
So it's not like drinking or taking drugs or gambling even, where the money immediately goes. Do you know what I mean? Where there are very quick outward signs of the addiction. So you're either impaired or you're bankrupt.
Yeah, it's visible, yeah.
You're just literally doing it in tandem with your daily life.
You're doing it in tandem with your daily life. It becomes, from what became something for me, a very unhealthy diet of activity. I think of the idea that you could be on your mobile phone and you could be doing the big shop and you could be emailing, and the next thing is, oh, well, this is something that I just do. And so I think that's what's really quite dangerous about how much of it is being used, But I'm hopeful by bringing it to light that we can really start understanding what's really going on, how all of our daily behavior is being dictated by what we are seeing online. And when so much of it is sexualized, someone that you'll know very well, Caitlin Moran, wrote this book about What About Men a few years ago. And there was a big chapter in it about pornography. And I remember listening to this book and being in tears in the gym, as it was, as there was this testimony from this family friend of hers, and she talks about this kid that the family knew. He was 20 years old, and he talked to the family, talked to the friends about being clean for 2 years. And everybody said, I don't know what you're talking about. The kid is smoking and drinking. And they're thinking, well, sober from what? And he said, from online pornography. And for this young person, it got so bad, combined with OCD. So his behavior was obsessive, and he had this compulsion to look at these images. It got so bad that his dad for 2 years had to put him to sleep because he was so terrified of the images that were going to come up in his mind when he went to sleep. And he talked about being 16 years old and logging onto Instagram. Just as a 16-year-old boy, put that information in, as simplified as that the algorithm automatically knows what it's going to give you. And a lot of that is maybe not the extremity of explicit content, but certainly a pathway.
So when you talk about that, what's really coming up for me is the great harm. So all addictions harm not just the person that is suffering from the addiction, but people around them. My addiction certainly harmed people around me. So how, and I want to know, because you said you were desperate for a long time to get out of it.
Yeah.
And just to kind of, because there might be people who cynically think, just in the way that we don't, there are people that don't believe any addiction is real, and then it's all a choice, right?
Yeah.
Let's be honest about that, right?
Yeah.
And then there are people that I remember years ago when Michael Douglas spoke about being a sex addict, which we now sort of accept is a thing, right? People were like, oh, this is some Hollywood thing, And I think it's really important for us to take this very seriously, because this is really harming generations of people, and what they're seeing is quite traumatic. And as you say, there's so much shame attached to it that it's something people really have to deal with alone. And there's a great bravery to speaking about it. That 20-year-old boy being able to say, I'm 2 years clean of explicit adult content, and you sitting here being able to say, I imagine you're about 18 months now clean? Yeah.
Yeah.
by the way.
Yeah.
Can we have a
Thank you.
round
Thank
of applause?
you. I appreciate it.
You know, there are, this is incredible, like the bravery to hold yourself to it, because this is the whole thing, yourself accountable. Getting clean and sober from an addiction is the ultimate accountability. You're taking responsibility for your actions. None of us are to blame for how we should, you know, how trauma has impacted our lives, but we are responsible for taking action and when we realize it, changing things. So tell me how you went from, because I know we spoke about how difficult it was for you to extricate yourself from this world. Tell me how you came to realize that you had a problem. How did that come about? Because, you know, addiction, again, is a disease of denial. So lots of us don't know we have it until we do. And then you go, oh, fuck. And then how you get on to extricate it. But what the harms are, looking back, that you see on the way you had relationships in the world, you know. I'm fascinated by that.
No, I think you're so right. It is absolutely a world of denial. I think you would rather deny it to yourself as well as the people that are around you. It becomes such a hidden world. But there is some consciousness in it, but I was so desperate to remove myself from it. I mean, I would be with partners, and then after I've been with a partner, I would go to use.
Right.
Because I think from an early age, I knew what I found stimulating. I knew what was normal in my mind. And I think from a public health point of view, and this is such sensitive stuff, but I think it's important to bring it to the surface, that the NHS recognised porn-induced erectile dysfunction. And this is a little bit graphic for people to understand, but if you are a young person, if you're any person, and you know how to give yourself pleasure from a physical point of view, from a pressure point of view, it is very difficult to be able to replicate that in a healthy, normal relationship. And that is the reality of overexposure and overstimulation to these kind of images. And I was absolutely in the throngs of this. These were my relationships. You know, gosh, Bryony, I spent thousands of pounds on apps, and there are websites where it becomes impossible to remove yourself from them.
So these are apps that have explicit adult content on them, right? Okay.
Yeah, and if you are adding a credit card to that, there's a process that is easy for you to get in. It becomes very difficult for you to remove that credit card.
And how because it's not as simple as, I mean, it's a bit like the gambling industry, from what I understand. So it's not as simple as just saying goodbye and they leave and they accept you're gone.
Yeah,
there's all sorts of kind of underground things going on to make you stay.
What I found was, not only is it difficult to remove yourself from a credit card, if there's 1p still left on it, you need to spend it. You need to go back into that world to find a way to remove it. There's all sorts of things. You're so shamed by what's going on. You don't actually want to. You don't want to do more, but you have to do more in order to remove it. It gets you back into the cycle. There are some places that I was unable to remove myself from because you had to email in.
Right.
You had to email your name and you had to write a message saying, this is me. And imagine me, I've got a public profile. The idea of me emailing in to saying, I'd like to move, but you now have information, my details, you have my email address, you have my name. That's shame. There is this massive shame in wanting to remove yourself, because you actually have to shine a light on, this is the person that you are. And if you are in the throngs of it, or something that you do shamefully or underground or disguised away from the people that you love, you don't want to bring that to light.
So I'm imagining that you're living in a lot of fear because you're a public figure.
Sure.
And that's all adding to the shame.
Yeah. And I guess in my life, I guess where I got to, you know, I had, like I said at the very beginning, we had been through so much as a family. My sister's suicide changed a lot for me, because I knew that they had lived so much of their life in shame.
Mm-hmm.
They had lived so much of their life humiliated by the person that they were, who they were, how they loved, the struggle, the conflict that they had within them. And in the end, like I said, it became too much. And I decided, and that helped me understand that we can't live life in shame. We can't live our lives thinking that adaptation of our personality is the person that we are, because we think that there's kind of no way out. And I had already escaped it. I had forgiven myself. I had gone through enough work to understand that this was a programming and a dependency that had grown from a very early age, that I had thankfully managed to escape on a day-to-day level. I mean, as you'll understand this, as an addict, you're always an addict.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to find ways to manage those behaviors or those urges, and you have to quiet those voices to remember that self-worth, who you really are, and put a lot of that dependency, a lot of that behavior to one side. And I decided not that I had escaped it myself, but when I came to understanding what was really going on societally and for our kids and young people and the world that they're kind of growing up in, I knew that my sister had given me a fearlessness that I know bringing this to light was going to shock a lot of people. There's a sensitivity around the nature of the subject matter that I guess I knew that if I didn't say something, knowing what I know, despite the potential to a reputational damage, I couldn't accept 5-10 years down the line, seeing this continue to destroy young lives exponentially. And that's why I thought it was so important to bring it to the table. I've lost so much in my life, Bryony, so much in my life, that I know this could all end tomorrow. And I think if we go through our lives living in a shame or not speaking up about things that are important to us and the people that are connected to us, that if I knew I could have made a difference, even to one person, that allowed them to come out and speak about something that they were struggling with, I couldn't forgive myself.
You are taking me right back to the last months and days of my drinking and using, and the shame and the constant fear that I was going to get found out, I think that was, and this realization I had when I was lucky enough to go to rehab. And I remember sitting in a room and sitting in this circle, and once a week we'd all have to share the most shameful things we'd done while drinking or using, whatever our addiction of choice was. And I remember the counselor explaining it to me, that shame dies when you expose it to the light. And I remember it landing with me so hard, because I felt as an alcoholic and a drug addict that I had lived, again, like you, this kind of double life. And I was worthless, and I was a fraud in the the life that people saw, which was as a successful writer, as someone running, as someone who interviewed royals on podcasts about their mental health. I was like, fraud, this is the real you. This is the disgusting you. This is the shameful you. And once that I was able to publicly go, these are the things I've done. These are the things that I've done.
Yeah.
I woke up in a field. I came around in a field with a man going down on me who was not my husband. Do you know what I mean? Like the week before I had my last drink, because I had basically allowed this man to do it because he'd been giving me cocaine. And that was how low I sunk. And I was like, this happens to people. This happens to people. And if I can't, as the platform, as a mental health campaigner, speak honestly about these dark places that I went, what hope do other people have? Because we have to accept this happens.
Yeah.
This happens to people. And either we want to make them bad, to make ourselves feel better, or we want them to get better. And I want people to get better.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is the same thing, Ore, and I think it's incredible. I want to ask you how you've got better and what you do, what being clean looks like for you. Because, it's easy with, I presume it means looking at no explicit adult material, but you speak about how the whole world is a trigger. Yeah. So there's a million questions I've just fired at you there.
No, and I'm so proud of you. I am. I know you've gone through it. I know you're on the other side and you're such an incredible advocate for recovery. And what you've just explained is, again, even going back to it, I found that what's so hard about this for me, it's like, I was ready to put all of this behind me and start living the life with an awareness about who I am, who I really am, and put all of this to bed. Going through it again is like being the drug addict, going back into the crack den.
Yeah.
Bringing it back to life and going, that was me. It is so hard. It's so hard. But like you, I just want people to know that they aren't the problem. The problem is not them. Something has happened along the line. No person is born broken. No person is born wanting to do harmful things. And especially when it comes to children, there is an innocence that somewhere along the line, something breaks, something that they need, something that they feel isn't given to them, and they find it in other places. It has completely changed how I see the world. It's completely changed my relationships. I think about this level of awareness that I have about the person that I am today and how I behaved, and a lot of how my anxieties or how my panic attacks are kind of manifesting themselves in relationships with family members or my own children. And having removed all of that shame and a lot of that, understood where that behavior, where that addiction came from, being free of it allows me to kind of forgive myself, have so much more kindness to myself and grace for myself, that I can show up as a much fuller version of me to everybody that I meet, to everybody that I know and connect with. And it's so wonderful. But like I said, it's something that I have to still manage on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. There is a neurological mapping in my mind that started when I was a kid that I have managed to finally create some distance between. And now I have the tools to try to kind of manage it. Beyond that, there are incredible charities out there that want to help. But I do feel like the moment that I started talking to my friends about this, seeing that they didn't judge me, the thing that I feared the most in the world, and like you said, that fraudulent feeling, my friends knew me as this person, or from a public point of view, I was understood as this person. Absolutely could not let this cat out of the bag. That the people that I was closest to in the world, the minute I started sharing this with them and them wanting to guide me through that struggle, one, validate me, accept me for the person that I was, that wasn't that version, I immediately started lifting that shame.
Yeah.
And I started to go, okay, I spoke to my therapist about this, and she said, it's not abnormal. It's not a glitch in the matrix. This is so many people because they're just shamefully hiding a version of themselves away that they don't think is going to be accepted by the people that they love most in the world, or the version of themselves that's being projected outwardly. And so the minute that they start taking accountability for it, sharing that burden with people that they care about, it starts changing everything. And then you can start adding in the tools to start removing yourself from a behavior that you've been fighting for 2 weeks, 2 years, or 20.
So have you spoken to presumably you've spoken to your mother about it?
Yeah.
Is that a healing thing? We don't have to talk about this.
No, I want to, because it is the best thing. It's the best thing, Bryony. I think about the fact that when you've lost the people that I've lost in my life, you really start hanging on to the people that you've still got.
Mhm.
And there was a point a couple of years ago that I wasn't sure that I wanted my own mum in my life because of how I was feeling in our relationship. You know, there was a certain patterns of behavior that were kind of destructive to our relationship. Of course, I love my mum, but I had got to a point in my life where I was feeling unloved.
Okay.
My mum didn't feel that way, but I felt that way. That was how I'd been made to feel around our behaviors. And so everything that was happening, I decided it wasn't actually that I wanted that person out of my life. I wanted the feeling to change. And I had a conversation with my mum, bringing a lot of things to light, understanding our relationship better. And I said, I want this to change. I want to have a relationship with you. I don't want to lose you as well. And it was the beginning of the relationship that I always wanted. You know, I had a conversation with my mum about this, about addiction, that I was going to start speaking about this. And, you know, I was prepared to do this because I knew it was something that had to happen. But to get the blessing of my family, I spoke to my older sister about this as well, gave me the kind of strength and reassurance that they also accepted me. But I had a conversation with my mum on the eve of my 40th birthday that I wish I could have had at 14.
Mm.
And though when I spoke to my mum on FaceTime, as it was, seeing her face drop because she had no idea that this was her son. But you know what, Bryony, she sat and she listened. She just listened for an hour and a half. And we spoke about so much. And whilst it makes her uncomfortable, for me to understand that my mum still accepts me as the person that I am, beyond the position in a public space or accolades or achievements, that kind of level of and material that I was kind of grew up was the only thing that was acceptable. The person that I am and the person that I became and the person that I'm trying to become is absolutely everything. And, you know, I think my mum's in her late 70s now, and I go, I don't know how much longer I have with this person because we all understand the fragility of life. And I just cherish every day that I have with her now as the person that I always wanted to be. But it took all of that beforehand to finally break out as this person. And it's incredible. I wish it for anybody.
So I feel like I'm thinking about anyone listening or watching who has this issue themselves and who may, until this conversation, have felt completely isolated and completely alone about it. And what I want to end this podcast with is your advice to them. What would you say to anyone listening to this who is struggling with addiction to explicit adult content and who thinks that it completely defines them, that they are worthless because of it, that they can't get out of it? What would your passing words be to them, Ore?
I think about what I would have loved to have told myself. And you aren't who you think you are. And you're not alone. I think we can't begin to deal and escape addiction until we realize that there is a problem. And the moment we understand that we're going through something or struggling with something, that there's some kind of conflict, that is the point at which you can start to change. But that person isn't you, that there is help out there. And I look at the world that we're all living through now, this digital smartphone world, that a lot of what's happening isn't consciously our decision. You know, I think of so much of our behaviors or what are being created by our behavior with our phones. And so having an understanding that that behavior isn't a choice. That actually, if I want to make a change, I have to build in a level of awareness that I am going through something. And immediately, as soon as you started doing that, speaking to those people that care about you, because we think in that moment that nobody will accept this version of us. But if we speak to those people that care about us, realizing that they do accept us for who we are, that they can help guide us through something really difficult, that there is avenues and help out there to kind of get through it. It's a daily battle, and it will take small steps, but I could never have imagined 30 years ago, or even 20 or 10, 5 years ago, Bryony, that I would be here speaking with you about something that had become a through line my entire life, about a behavior that I was so appalled by myself and had left my own mental health completely on the floor. You know, I went through a number of rock bottoms, as well as years of therapy and 2 bereavements and a huge life change, to be able to go, I finally see what's happening now, but I want to change it. And we all have the power to do it, and we are worth something, and we have so much to live for in a positive, beautiful way with the people that we care about. And that sometimes it just starts with one conversation. And I really hope that this might be one of the conversations that people might listen to and go, okay, I want to start day one today.
I'm so grateful for you coming and talking about this with such candor, because we've got to have these conversations. We've got to expose shame to the light. We will put details for organizations that can help with addiction in the show notes. So if you are affected by any of the issues in this episode, you can find them there. And I know that this isn't something that you are not going to put down. You're not going to suddenly say it and then get on with your life. I know that this is something that matters a lot to you, hence being an ambassador for smartphone-free childhood. I know you want a different world for your children, for all of our children.
I mean, I don't take it lightly. We can't. We absolutely can't. And I think of what's happening. Half of it is, you know, I have quite a good memory. I think trauma does a lot to your memory, that actually, like we've been through, you end up blocking a lot of it out, and actually to go back in there is really, well, there's bravery in it, but also you're uncovering things that actually in your mind you've kind of blocked out for a long time. But also I think this issue requires this level of seriousness. I think we are taking it seriously, but I'm not sure that everybody understands the level, the extent of how prevalent and how insidiously it has kind of predicated society.
Yeah.
And there is not one listener, not one person watching this podcast that won't have an affliction or a connection to what we've been talking about, whether passively or actively.
Yeah.
Everybody has an opinion on this, and it's so important to lift the lid on what's really happening, the extent and extremity of what we're seeing, how it's affecting our children, and changing the conversation, not having it sitting in the dark, or, you know, waiting until something's happened, or waiting till a sex education class at school, or hoping that the government steps in with an online safety bill that means that we don't have to deal with it. And so I was desperate to bring it to attention, but then I realized, if this is going to begin a change, I know that this is a baton that I've picked up, that I have to continue to bring it to people. And I hope that it instigates a collective societal approach change that means that we can all start looking at what's going in our own hands, in our own homes, and in our own relationships, and want to start changing it.
I said this to you when we spoke last week. You're owning your part and potentially what could have been very dark, and you're shedding light on it, and you're speaking out against it. And I'm really grateful to you for coming and having this conversation with me.
Thank you, Bryony. I knew it was important to bring to light something that I was struggling with. By bringing it to light, we can kind of have these conversations that are compassionate, that we know that everybody's just trying to navigate, that we're so much more similar than we think, that hopefully that's going to just allow people to be more accepting of themselves. And more I've spoken about with amazing people like you, friends, people in my close circle, wonderful people of influence. Everybody wants this to be different, to create a new platform of what is normal and acceptable and consensual. And the moment we understand and the moment we recognize that we want to change that together, I think we really can. And I'm hopeful, but I appreciate that, darling. This has been hugely healing for me. And
well, I wanted to do it. We started with a check-in. Let's end with a check-in. How are you feeling, my love?
Well, you know, I'm anxious because I'm bringing parts of my life that publicly people won't appreciate or understand or think that someone like me would even delve into that kind of that place. And so again, talking about it with you just brings it to the surface, but it comes up and it's gone, Bryony. It comes up and it's gone. If we hold on to these things and keep them in ourselves because we think that they've got nowhere to go, we don't know how to deal with them, they stay in us and they come to a boiling point. That's where anxiety comes from, because we think we can't deal with it. We haven't got the power to deal with it. But the minute we bring it to the surface and share it, we realize that we have so much potential to overcome something that we think is bigger than us, because it's actually not. It's really not. Don't get me wrong. I feel like I need a 24-hour lie down and you know, I don't really drink, but I could absolutely do a triple vod right now. But yeah, I think this is a good thing. And thank you for the time and the space. And I think I said it at the beginning, someone like you who has such sensitivity around this issue, that also wants to bring change to mental health, wants to remove stigma and help people navigate such a difficult world. I'm so grateful to you, because I don't know where this goes from this point, but I really hope it helps people change.
Ore, thank you for joining me on my quest to expose shame to the light. A massive thank you to Ore for speaking with such candor. I know it can't have been easy, but it will undoubtedly have helped so many people. He'll be back on Friday for our special bonus episode, The Life of You. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe, follow, and share with someone who might need to hear it. I'll see you next time.